Do we have anything that we should be asking you about with your church records before? Again, this is for Nils, and again, you're looking at church records, which from 1940 forward are in fact in English. Did you find anything sort of when does this book of records end? I mean, what is your time period? So,
good question.
you know, for example, we know that Edith died in 1958. We know that Carl died in 55. We know that Moore died between the two.
Yeah.
50, so I'm guessing now 57 time period. Esther's on the back side of the
C.S. Carlson.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I've looked at, I've tended the grave, and I just kind of a name. I thought, who the heck is she?
1949.
1949. Okay, so that would not have notations on those last three obits that I talked about. I wonder if it would have. When did Stanley die?
He was 16.
Okay,
Yeah,
the only thing in here about Stanley was the church sent condolences and the heartbreak, and that's in Swedish,
Okay.
the heartbreak of his death. Yeah.
You can get better ones, 50s.
The 50s must be at the church.
Can I ask about what we know about that,
Yeah.
the passing of Stanley?
Sure.
I know that what I've heard is that he was going to be delivering some meat or
Yep.
something to somebody.
Yep.
That he walked between two cars. I thought maybe he slipped on the ice or something.
No.
But evidently it wasn't winter time.
It was June.
And so how did this, what happened? How
He
did
had
die?
put the meat in the back of a car and the door was open, and a car came and clipped the door and it hit him. But the person driving the door was cleared of any, ill whatever.
So he was on the driver's side?
Yeah, he
With the door open?
Yeah.
And he was putting some meat inside?
Yeah,
And somebody came and,
hit the door and it hit him, and
He was 16.
yeah.
There
And I
is.
have a picture of his, it's in one of the albums, but I have that too. A picture of him in the casket with all the flowers.
But anyways, there's a number of pages dedicated to the articles that were in the paper on Stanley.
okay,
So my mother covers it
pretty well.
pretty well.
Well, I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, and there was as there is always, there's a coroner's inquest, and the driver was cleared. There was eyewitnesses and who sort of said what.
Was he killed instantly, or did they take him to a hospital?
They took him to a hospital, but
But I think he was dead before they got there.
I think that's just get him out of the scene, you know.
Yeah,
It was one of those microsecond kind of things that had it been a little before, a little bit after, nothing would have happened. It's just one of those things that took place, and evidently the
Pretty
Lord's
much,
going to
yeah.
explain that to us when we get to heaven.
And when you see the video that I did for my mother, it says Stanley. I mean, I dedicate
yeah.
about 10 minutes to it. Walt, Cindy's dad, had a moment where, because they were buds, I mean, they're
I didn't know
thick
that.
as thieves.
Ah,
And in the movie, Walt and I interviewed him about this. He said, yeah, let me tell you about what happened, because I was not there, but I was elsewhere, and I had a premonition.
oh, really?
You know, I just remember as clear as day as something awful had happened to my best friend Stanley, and as would have it, boom, that was the
That
moment
was it, yeah.
when he was hit.
Those are
It's really kind
moments.
of chilling to hear Walt talk about it, because it's in great detail, and he's very emotional about it, still, many years afterwards.
He had a compression in his chest at a time, kind of checked that time, and it was the same.
Yeah, I mean, it was a physical
Yeah,
reaction,
yeah.
aside from mental, it was a physical reaction. So, that's in the video, and I'm sure Cindy would talk about it. The other thing, we interviewed Cornelia,
Yes,
when she was here, about the impact of Stanley's loss on our grandmother. And she went into great detail about how significant, and you just don't get over it, that Cornelia talked about. So I'm not sure, did she ever talk to you about Stanley Minner?
No. I'd love to see that video.
Yeah, it's what's on the history, it's on the biography, it's a 2.5 hour,
That's all right.
part 1 and 2. But if you scroll through it, you'll see one of them just says Stanley.
Okay.
And you dedicate a whole.
And these are all on that 101?
Yeah, the 101. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Stanley thing is,
It was traumatic for the whole family, quite clearly.
you don't get over that.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
And wrongly, I think CS blamed himself.
Do you?
Well, yeah, that was the narrative, because he was delivering meat for him. It's not, we don't make sense of sometimes the feelings and thoughts we have. It makes no sense. It wasn't his fault.
No.
But he kind of, that was a burden he carried.
My dad did the same thing.
Yeah.
My dad thought it was his fault.
Yeah. Not logical, but you can understand.
Yeah.
When we interviewed your dad, he had his first stroke.
Stroke, yeah, so it's not very...
There's enough there to put in the video and stuff, but.
Yeah, but it's hard. Yeah, it was really hard for me to watch some of that,
I
actually.
bet.
So, yeah.
And we will find the full video of Harold one time, because in the absence of finding the video, I have found everything else, including original TV movies of Amos and Andy.
Oh, that's amazing. Amos and Andy, all right.
I love it.
Let me ask, when did your father have a stroke?
He had 3 of them, actually, so I don't know the exact
Okay, were
dates.
they just a few years before he passed away, or?
No, it was really much before that.
Okay.
Yeah, because he had a stroke, and actually Cindy's sister, who's a nurse, one of them, assisted, and they cleared the artery, and so he was pretty good after that. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. He lost half his sight, so he could see. He would sit and look at, if you put his food in front of him, if it was on the right-hand side, he would eat it. But if it was on the left-hand side, he thought the plate was empty. So, yeah, he didn't recover from that. But he still lived a pretty good time.
He did. I mean, you have a lot of movies, that's how you know it.
Yeah.
My mother would have Hank and Vi, and he would not hesitate trying to talk. It just took a while.
It took a while.
That's all.
Painful to watch, but yeah.
When he was, I read that everybody, he would greet everybody when they came to the market, and he would, just such a kind man, and he would help everybody and so on. Can you describe his disposition when he was really healthy and really?
Yeah, that would be it. When at the funeral, one of the most incredible things, the night before when everybody comes to visit, the number of people who stopped to tell me that during the war or the Depression, he just gave them meat and really saved their families' lives. And he never asked for anything back, never said it was a loan, and some of them said I did manage to give him something at some point, and some said I never had it. But it was, they did that. He did that all the time for people. Grandpa was called Sweet Carlson at the market. But then my dad was there. My mom worked for him. I worked there twice, many times actually. But once, when I was 16 working in the market, a woman came up and said, Vi, I need. Now, Vi's my mother, and when you're 16, being called by your mother's name is not very nice.
Oh my God.
Now, I've heard that CS would do the same thing. He would take me away, and your father probably got
He
that
just got it all from
thing
him, yeah. I mean, that's just what they did. Yeah.
Again, back on the video, I think Wilson watched. My mother found a guy when we were doing this, he was 90-something, on Sweet Hill, who told that story. I mean, about how CS had saved the family, put everything on credit, basically, don't worry about it, and he goes, I think we paid it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but he protected us, and it was very heartwarming. But my mother got us, we got that on film. So it's, what I remember about your dad is my mom would go down there and he'd go down the slopes to go to the market. It was like, it was dangerous actually, walking down to get into the market, especially from
Newland.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we go over there, and it'd be my mother would buy some meat, but he always gave us a raw hot dog.
Yes, I remember eating a raw hot dog.
I thought that was the greatest thing. I got a free raw hot dog, and you're eating it.
Yes.
Nowadays, you think, ooh.
Yeah, we love to tell the tale.
That was neat.
Yeah.
He just reached in the couch, and here, Greg, and here, Randy, and that was it.
And we were never allowed to eat a hot dog that wasn't one of his.
Oh.
Because he would tell us all the things other people put in their hot dogs.
Did he make the hot dogs?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
they were linked, tied together.
Yeah, linked and tied, yep.
I forget, I guess you cut it.
Yeah, you cut it, yeah.
Now, did he own a stockyard too, or where did he get his meat from?
All over. He had deals with a lot of the farmers around.
Okay.
And, one of the joys of growing up for me was I went to the slaughterhouse with him. And now I don't like meat very much, but then I was just so proud to be able to go.
Okay, now he didn't own the slaughterhouse, did he?
Yeah, he did own the slaughterhouse, yeah.
So they'd bring him there, and then he hired men to...
He did it mostly.
He did it?
He did most of it. He had lockers here, and one in Fredonia, and one in Cuba, I think.
Farmers would bring him at the slaughterhouse. How big was the slaughterhouse?
Pretty big.
Okay.
Yeah.
They'd bring him cows and so on, and he'd buy them from them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he'd kill the cow and
dress it out,
and skin it.
Mm-hmm.
Did he take the hide and give it to the tanner?
The other part of after we had slaughtered things, then we put all the hides in the truck and we went to the glue factory and dropped them off.
Down at Frewsburg?
Yeah.
The rendering
factory, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And deliver the hides, yeah.
So the hides were they tanned or were they made into glue? Or what?
They were just after you skinned them.
Okay, I understand that. You skin them, but what do you do then with you took the hides to the glue factory?
Yeah.
Did they turn them into glue? Is that what you're saying? Or
I think that's what they did. That's why I called it the glue factory.
Boiled it. I'm not sure, but the smell was horrendous.
Oh, it was awful. Oh, it was awful.
Everybody remembers the rendering factory in Frewsburg.
Yeah.
So they didn't turn it into leather so that they could be used that way?
No.
And then
my son would do that, but no.
Okay, your dad would then cut these into quarters and then
sometimes just the side and hang it in the cooler at work and cut it at work.
So he knew exactly how to cut the pieces of meat to sell them okay.
That's interesting.
And he learned that from his dad.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't have schools back then.
No, they did not have schools back then. No.
And where did C.S. learn this skill? Did he learn it from someone else there in Jamestown, or was his father a butcher back there in Sweden?
One of the facts that has not been checked out yet is that he went back to Sweden and learned how to do that.
Was that before he was married?
No, after he was married.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't know. I haven't gotten that far in my search to know whether that's a true story or not yet.
According to my mother's book, Oscar Lindblom taught C.S. the business. And there's pictures of Oscar and C.S.
Yeah, Oscar was certainly a big part of it.
Yeah, so that's kind of...
Is that who he went to work for?
Yeah.
He lived with him for a while, didn't he? Or not?
Oscar Lindbergh? No, I don't think so.
Oscar Lindbergh, he owned the shop, right? He owned the meat shop. So he went to work for him.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's, again, there's pictures of that. And again, what's my source material? My mother.
Your mother, yeah. Most of it's right.
Probably pretty correct.
I know he was injured. He went to, he got patched up.
Yeah, that was when he was working at the mill in Austin.
In Austin, okay.
Pennsylvania, yeah.
And do you know how long he worked at the mill in Austin? How many years? Or
I think it was about, I thought it was
well, you're going to love the book now that you've asked all these questions because it's loaded with Austin.
Yeah.
And that was the point of destination. So when they went from Gothenburg into Worcester, Mass. I'll tell you a funny story in a second. And then they found their way Carlson, which we haven't focused in on,
Yeah.
to Austin.
To Austin.
Austin.
What was it about Austin that they wanted to go?
Timber.
That was a timber center.
Yeah.
And there you'll see most, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 when they go through the Carl genealogy. Oscar, I think, is one of them.
Yeah.
And there's
A lot of them. Rockman was there.
so
there's
Austin, and there's, my
Yeah.
mother found pictures of that.
Yeah.
And
And after the accident, he did a restaurant.
in
which
Sheffield.
In Sheffield, which none of us have
Hires some girls and he
understood.
does.
Yeah.
Was this just his own idea, maybe I can make some money? And so he was gonna cater to the lumberjacks? is that it?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But we can't ever figure out how CS managed a restaurant since he couldn't cook or do anything else.
Well,
like
you see that
Yeah.
one famous picture, I mean, there's.
Oh, the arm thing.
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable.
Have you seen that picture?
I've seen it and it is
unbelievable.
unbelievable. I mean,
It is
I don't think they
unbelievable.
do that today.
What is it?
A big accident on his right arm. I mean, his entire arm, body, it's just seeming like in a open metal.
And it looks like it's got skewers.
Pins, there's all pins
There
on
are
it.
all these skewers sticking out and all this stuff. And both Phil and Dad talk about going to the pharmacy and picking up leeches because it would swell.
Underneath it.
Yeah, and they would put, and you would
breed
put the
it.
leeches on and let it draw all that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrendous disability he would have had.
And they used to have leeches available at the pharmacy.
Yeah, yeah.
And Phil would pick those up and
Phil and Dad, yeah.
Phil and that, and
Those two are
Phil at the
inseparable.
medical school, did he learn this?
No, this is when they were, this is when they were
I thought that
little.
was George Washington's era.
No, this was when they were little.
Isn't this?
But they would go.
Yeah, and it's, what's interesting on Austin, again, you'll enjoy my mother's book because she spends time on that, is so many were in Austin, but they all left in, basically everybody except CS, he left a little bit earlier, in 1911. It's all 1911, and you see it, and then my mother and I one day, because we were into this, she goes, I've never been to Austin, I don't know where it is, let's look at the map. So we looked at the map, and it's about an hour and a half from here, maybe 2 hours. So we just tooled off, and it was a Sunday, I remember, I picked her up at church, and we went down there, and immediately you're taken by the fact there's this huge dam that is no longer, but it's just the remnants of it. And you say, what is that? And you go down into Austin and you learn in 1911,
The big flood.
dam broke,
Yep.
and there was
flood.
a huge Johnstown type flood,
Yeah.
wiped out almost 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy did it, and we bought a DVD, which I just now put it up on YouTube. It's just up.
Good.
We have that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We went there and, yes.
they're same thing.
Yes.
And so you see it, and I watched it just the other day to wrap my head around it. And then I went back and looked at my mother's book again, and there's a postcard from Austin in 1911. She's got there talking about how they didn't lose the farm during this, essentially because they didn't own it, they were really renting it. So everything happened in 1911. You can just imagine flood. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
So enter where we go. Well, there's a Swedish community.
Community, just up the road.
On
And my mother has
side, not my
pictures
grandfather's
of
side.
CS in front of the Swedish Baptist Church in Austin.
You know, he also was in the Salvation Army in Pennsylvania.
And they think that's part of the Sheffield aspect
That
of
is,
it. You know,
okay.
serving people in Sheffield as part of being there. So it's all kind of, it's fascinating.
He was in Austin when the flood took place?
He was not.
He was not.
He was
He
out.
had already left.
He'd
Yeah.
left. He'd left. The other
other
brothers
brothers.
were.
Yeah.
But
So-
they survived the flood, I mean, they were.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody yet. Nobody got lost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you know the dates that he was in Sheffield with the registry?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think it's in the book. Again, it's
Yeah.
you'll see it's right underneath the picture of the arm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, what brought him to Jamestown? Because that's another 20 miles away, right?
Family.
Family?
Well,
What brought Carl to
I think
Jamestown?
Carl came first.
Did he?
I think so.
Well, time-wise, you would think about before 1911, maybe. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Probably because there was a Swedish community here.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
So did was a restaurant, did it not make it or something, and he had to move on, or, I mean,
We don't know.
the reason why something, but
I don't know, Sheffield had a big Swedish community, I'm guessing that was a Salvation Army thing.
Might have been.
Yeah, where they worked that aspect because, but he was here, but they got married in 1911.
Was it? No, it wasn't 1911.
they said what I read, said that he had met Edith in 1910.
Yeah, so he was already back here before the dam
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I knew that.
Did he arrive in 1910 and then meet Edith, and then they had a whirlwind romance and married the next year?
You know, I don't know that all of the timing on that, when he arrived, but there's lots and lots and lots of pictures of my mother, my grandmother and grandfather at various church functions. I mean, the book is replete with all these Baptist youth group pictures, and I suspect that was all done before they got married, so it's probably a few years. I don't want to say several.
Carl came to the U.S. in 1903.
Yeah. And then, but that was Austin, he was kind of.
Yeah, that was Austin, yeah.
And then, a few years later, ended up in Sheffield for, I'm guessing, for about a year. And then worked his way to Jamestown. Now, why he went to Jamestown, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah.
I gotta believe your questions probably got answered by Phil. Because Phil seemed to have a pretty good sense of it all, and he was the.
Did he answer that in
And
that?
I don't know the answer. I mean, if it was a big if.
Yeah.
A big if.
I think I stopped listening when he said to avoid the draft, he left Sweden.
Well, my mother picked that up. It's in the book. And now it's gospel.
Now it's gospel, yeah.
My mother did. I mean, the distance between, my Phil and Henry was pretty significant.
Yeah, oh yeah. Huge time difference.
So, yeah, it's all interesting. Well, talk about, we're going to interview you here, Lynn, because you're the only one who really had a relationship with Edith. What do you remember about her?
She was absolutely wonderful. She just took good care of us all the time. We used to, you got milk delivered, and in the winter the cream would come up and it would freeze, and I would bring the cream over to her, and she would sour it, and then every Sunday we would get sourdough biscuits for Sunday stuff. Here's a Harold, a you story, a Jimmy and Ronnie story. Yeah, you guys came when you were young, 5, something like that, I think, to visit.
Right.
And you came over to our house, and I taught you to play Old Maid.
I remember that.
And your dad did not like that.
Cards.
Playing cards.
He didn't like. He had something against playing regular cards.
Yeah. Well, he thought
Old Maid was not a big deal.
Well,
but regular cards were.
Well, except he came in and he bawled me out for playing cards with you. And then he took you home. And the next time I saw Grandma patted me and said, "It's all right. Don't worry about it." That was just Grandma. And she did that for every one of the grandkids. Donnie got drunk at a wedding once, some family wedding, and just trying it out. He was like 12 or 14, I can't remember. And again, Grandma just said, "Lesson learned," and moved on.
Tell them about the mashed potatoes.
Oh, the mashed potatoes, yes. My sister Tanya was dating the man she married, Richard Starvierski, and that was at a time in Jamestown when we did not mix Swedes with other things, other whatever you call them. And the whole Sunday, and we always ate Sunday dinner with them, and the whole table was just blah, 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 about this Polish guy, and Grandma came in from the kitchen, And she didn't slam the potatoes down, but they did hit the table with a noise so that everybody looked up. And then she just looked at the whole table and she said, enough. She loves him, enough. And nobody ever said another word against him.
That's great.
She really was the matriarch.
Yeah.
She really was of that whole family.
You know, she was the strength behind him.
Exactly.
A lot is talked about him, but I think my mom said, boy, she was the one that was cooking for the missionaries that came to visit. She was the one that kept the house, the children.
She made all the kids' clothes, including underwear.
Really?
She was a great seamstress, yeah. Ruth talks about, the number of pairs of underwear that Grandma had to make every year and, stuff like that. And when I was in high school and I got invited to 2 dances, they were formal dances.
Dances?
Oh, dances were fine with them. But we could only afford one dress. And I was embarrassed to tears that I would have to wear that dress twice. Friday night and Saturday night, everybody would know because it's almost the same groups every time. Grandma, overnight, took that dress apart, and everything that had color on it was a different color. It had straps that were orange once, and then suddenly they were green, and there was straps that came across the bodice, and she had taken the whole thing apart, changed all of it for me overnight. So that I could wear different colored shoes, and I felt like I had a different dress.
That's a great story.
It was just, yeah, she was just that kind of person. The only opposite end of that was she used to pat me on the cheek and say, "Oh, Lynette, you have my nose. I feel so sorry." Yeah, but I loved her to death. And when C.S. and Gladys and Edith went to Arizona, I took care of the house and watered the violets for them when they were gone. And I have one C.S. story. I got to Grandpa sit when I was probably 12, I don't know. But I was scared to death. He was bedridden. And I was sure he was going to have to go to the bathroom, and what was I going to do? I had never even seen things like that before, and I didn't know what to. I sat there and I prayed. I literally prayed in the living room, please don't.
Please don't pee.
Yeah, please don't wake up, Grandpa. Please don't wake up.
Since we're telling funny stories, you have to tell that story about Tanya and how she took you to Midway, put you on the Ferris wheel.
That doesn't have anything to do with
Family, I want to forget that story. It's so funny.
My sister, who was 6 years older than I was, had to babysit me a lot because my mom would work with my dad and stuff. And one night she had a roller skating date, a real date with a guy at Midway Park. And Mom said, got to take care of Lynette. And Tanya said, we'll take her to Midway. She'll be fine.
Yeah.
So what she did was she took me to Midway, and there was a Ferris wheel, and she knew the guy who was running the Ferris wheel, and she put me on the Ferris wheel, and for 2 hours. On the Ferris wheel. And the first 15 minutes you think you're better than sliced bread because everybody else has to get off, and you're just going around. By the second hour, you're, please let me off.
Wow.
Oh dear, yeah.
Did your mother ever find out about that?
No, I did not tell.
That is
I
hilarious.
did not tell.
Oh,
That's hilarious.
Some of the stories about Harold,
well, I'll tell you a story about Harold.
and then I'll tell you some, and we'll see if they agree.
Yeah.
All right, you're first, Lynette. Go ahead. You're
It's interesting that when I listened to the tape with Phil, he described the trip to Chicago and where they got arrested for speeding or something. I don't know what it was, but they had to pay a fine and they didn't have the fine, so they left the car's tire as security with the sheriff. And Phil says they asked him to go back and steal it. My dad said they asked Harold to go back and steal it. And then my dad talked about how they made a treehouse, he and Phil. And they stole the paint to paint it from the paint store downtown Jamestown. And then they didn't like the paint color, so they sent Harold to trade it.
I remember that story.
Yes. And then the night they got married, talking about him, his stutter, the night they got married, they spent a night in Lakewood in some house. And Harold somehow got on the roof and was making noise and was trying to look in the window. And Dad had a gun. And he pointed the gun out the window and Harold said, no, it's me.
Oh, that's great.
So, what stories do you have?
Well, evidently, they used to go out and shoot the street lights that were gas lights.
Oh, yes.
With, I guess with BB guns or something. And the police came to the door. And my dad opens the door and the policeman says, we're looking for a young man who's been shooting at the streetlights and his name is Harold. And my father says, well, you know, I don't think we have a Harold here, but we do have a Henry.
Oh, I love it.
He says, I'll go get him. And then he took out the back door.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Oh, I'll tell you. I think that happened before he was baptized.
Probably. Oh, dear.
Well, my mother's kid, when they got married story, Lyle and Gladys, Harold was presiding, and they got to the moment, no, maybe he was best man. I guess he might have.
No, Gordy, I think, was his best man, but I know where you're going with
Okay,
it.
anyway, Harold had the ring. You know, they'd given him the ring to hold. And come the time for the ceremony, this too was on the video, you know, where, you know, now did give the ring, and he said, you know, he just Harold goes through, can't find, I don't have, you know, so immediately panics. You know, once the panic sets in, he pulls it out. You know?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding.
I can't get a kill him.
Sounds exactly like him.
I don't think he ever got. I don't think my dad ever got over him.
Even when he became a mature adult, he would pull things.
Yes.
We'd go out to, we'd have a special guest speaker come to the church, okay? This is when I was a kid. And we'd have a nice dinner at a restaurant. Well, during the dinner, my dad would take like a spoon, one of the spoons from the restaurant.
Put it on his nose?
Oh, no, he'd slip it into the fellow's pocket, the guest speaker's pocket. And then he, as he went to pay the bill, he said, you know, to the guys, to the manager, he says, you know, the fellow we have here, he says, he likes to take things. And he says, would you please ask him to check his pockets before you So the manager goes up to this guest speaker, you know, really important. He says, would you mind letting me look at your pockets and see? And this guy pulls out this screw. And my dad, he used to think that was a funny thing.
He ever did, yeah. Oh, dear.
That's funny stuff.
Oh, funny.
Now, let's go back to you, Lynette, because again, you are the only one here who could talk about Moomore.
Not really.
Well, I have no memory of you at all.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I should, but I don't.
Yeah.
I probably was too scared.
Yes, I told them last night, actually, that once Mortimer moved from Edith's house and went to live with one of the Ericksons, and I don't know which Erickson it was. Do you know?
I think it was Walter, because
Was it Walter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Walter. Sundays became a day where you went to see this person called Mormor. Meant nothing to me. Everybody else seemed to know what they were doing, but I was little, and it was like a royal appearance. You went in to see Mormor by yourself, one at a time, And she was dressed totally in black. There was not white like I saw in one of those pictures. She was just totally black. And I had no idea who this lady was. And she didn't speak in English, and I had no idea what was going on, and she would kiss your cheek, and I'm going,
What was the purpose? Were you to say, like, good morning, or
I have no idea what.
Nobody said anything to you?
Nobody said, whatever they said didn't make any sense to whoever I was at that point.
Wow.
I
Almost
just,
sounds like the mafia.
yeah. Oh, don't ask about the mafia, I'll tell you my story about the mafia.
Yeah, we need to know.
It doesn't have anything to do with our family, it's only me.
Okay.
That still would be interesting. What's the story?
When we moved to California, I got a job working for a trucking firm. My kids called me the mother trucker, but it turned I started out as a temporary job, and then I got hired, and I was a controller for one of their many agencies, Lackney Freight Forwarders, even though I was working in the Superior Assembly and Distribution section, different building altogether, but somehow I got the title controller. And I came into work one day, and my compatriot in the Chicago office had been murdered, shot, and in an office like ours, all open, nobody knew anything. And the guy who owned the company was just called by his last name. You never ever knew anything else. And and by then I realized there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. And I actually went to a lawyer and I said, I got to get out of this, but I don't know how to do it. And she said, Lynn, you pretend to be sick, you pretend to be sick again, and then you just say the doctor told you you have to resign. Because I was afraid by the time the FBI finished with that division in Chicago, they were going to come next to LA. And I was going to have to be a spy, and I did not want to be a spy. And I was afraid for my kids and us, so I did that. That's my mafia story.
Well, tell about how, because Mom used
Shortly thereafter, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared.
Mom used to talk about Mormore's birthday every year.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
Well, every year, she had a birthday party, and it had to be a big deal, and she had the speech made up for it, and it was always about how it was the last birthday she was ever going to have. But then there kept being more and more and more of them.
But every year,
yeah.
Your mother
And
did
by-
kind of something similar.
Yes, she did. We said that. Yes. Yeah. By then I knew who Mormor was. I wasn't afraid anymore. But
Did she ever talk English?
no, she had when she lived with Edith on the third floor. If the phone would ring, she would just pick it up and say, "No one here." That's all she learned was no one here.
So why did she move over? Was it?
I think it was when CS started getting ill,
Yeah.
and it was just too much for Grandma.
Talk about CS. I mean, all the image I have is the same that Jimmy has with regards to in a chair, kind of with Parkinson's, and that's what that was all about. Do you remember him healthy?
No, I do not remember him healthy.
And was it a gradual thing that happened to you?
I think so, because you guys all have stories about in the chair.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the chair. I remember coming back from Arizona and being bedridden.
So really, it's kind of started 1949. I think they got back time period.
Yeah. And by then, my dad was doing the market full time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And your dad was doing the market in Brooklyn Square.
Right.
And then when the urban renewal occurred,
Yeah.
then did he buy it? Then he bought the place on
Then
3rd Street.
on 3rd Street, named it Viking.
Viking Fruit, Carlson's Viking Fruit.
Yeah.
Where did your family, once Pastor Edstone left Chandler Street then, so it had to leave the parsonage, where did they go to live?
They lived in a house in Allen Park, just across from the gully It's still there. I go to visit it every time. Because even when I was like 5, I used to walk from our house on Sampson Street to their house
Wow.
to spend the weekend with my grandma when my mom was working.
This was Irene.
Yes.
Irene.
Yes.
Irene
Yes.
Edson, yeah,
Yes.
I remember this.
yeah.
It was a kind of a 2 or 3 story house.
Yeah, 2 stories with an apartment upstairs.
And a balcony or sort of
A balcony, yeah, and a big thing. Lyle's story. So,
Don't get started.
Who's gonna make us nervous?
no. Grandpa Edston was sitting out on that porch, and Lyle and his buddies came down the street, made a huge amount of noise, and I was in the baby buggy, and they woke me up.
No.
And my grandfather stood up and told your father that he couldn't act that way, that he woke his granddaughter up.
Good for him. He deserved it. Yeah, I mean, I remember it was a kind of a yellow house.
Yeah, it was yellow then, it's white now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I haven't thought about it, but it's down towards, you know where the chapel used to be, Betty Weekland Chapel?
Yeah,
down
yes.
there? It's on that side of the gutter, on the left-hand side, look over the
Yeah.
gully towards it, it's on the left-hand side.
And on a street where actually the side that faced the gully, I don't remember the name of the street, I'd have to look it up, but the side that faces the gully was the back of the house, and the front of the house was on the other street. There was no alley or anything, it was just a...
So would that be Camp Street?
Well, Camp Street is where the Betty Weekland Chapel was.
No, it's not Camp Street.
No, but
Yeah.
that's
Runs
where-
perpendicular to Camp Street.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
well, it's actually,
But I used to love to
Right.
sit in his study,
Maple.
in Grandpa Edston's study.
it's on the other side of
and
Camp Street.
pretend that I was a minister.
Beach.
I did. I do remember that, and I'd open up his cupboard, and there were
Being
still
prepared to be a
clergy things
minister's
there.
wife.
Yes.
Wow,
So,
that's interesting.
My father always spoke very highly of CS. And I think, like, CS was Sunday school superintendent. And then later, my dad became Sunday school superintendent for
oh, wow.
years
Yeah.
and years and years. I think my dad tried to model his walk of faith after CS.
Yes, that's interesting, yeah, yeah,
Well, your dad was incredible.
yeah.
But I remember, many things about Larry, but Sunday nights, the last thing as a high school kid I wanted to do was to go to church Sunday night. You had no choice.
Yeah.
And 2, he'd always lead in, he was always the leading singer, he was always on radio, things I remember, and he had an intro song and he had an exit song. And I'm drawing a blank, you would probably remember the songs.
Crown him with many crowns.
Oh, yeah,
The way to
for
get
sure.
it.
That was
Yeah.
the opening thing, yeah.
Yes, that was the opener.
But it was covered on radio, with the radio broadcast. But yeah, always Larry did it.
So you were live on radio every Sunday night?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was
And
the
then always,
Hour of Inspiration?
oh,
Hour of Inspiration.
Wow, yeah.
And the way it would work, I mean, we would have started, and then they would have been coming in from the radio station to pick it up, and Jimmy Truax would sit in the back and listen to the radio. And once he started hearing Crown Him with Many Crowns coming over the radio, he would hold up a sign and say, "We're on."
oh my gosh.
Oh,
And
wow.
Jimmy was a little
Yeah.
limited,
Limited.
okay? But that was a good job for him. Well, we had gone through singing all the verses of Crown Him with Many Crowns and started over. Because Jimmy forgot to hold up the sign.
We always liked Sunday nights because Baptist ministers, sorry Jim, they could go on and on us during our Sunday morning, but Sunday night they had to end because there was a definitive. So
He was on, you had to end too, huh? Because
Yeah,
he had
we were
a
on
radio
radio
program every morning. You had to get over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there was a period of time when we were on WJTN once a month. in the morning, in the morning service.
Yes,
There's a
yes.
guy, we used to always kind of sit behind the radio guy, WJTN, and he would be there with the dials, and it was just kind of fun to see how it worked. And about once a month, I think it was.
Well, how strong was the signal? How many people would hear that, and at what radio,
It was-
kind of
it
radio?
was fairly significant.
WJTN was,
Yeah, I would've
that
done-
was the radio
Sure,
station
would've
for
done
this area.
This whole area into
And they
Pennsylvania.
were the
and
emergency
around, Yeah.
Okay.
radio station, so.
What's the population?
Yes, and
Oh, yeah, we were a huge population then, compared to what.
More
we
than
are
now.
Yeah.
so many stuff. Just one quick Lyle Peterson story. Used to drive my mother nuts. My mother would be there playing at the piano. Of course, she could not move. And so we'd come in, my dad,
It was Hank.
at least my brother and I don't know, maybe you were part of this whole
And then there's
shit. But inevitably, my dad would sit in the back, and he'd be, and we had an aunt. My dad's
Oh, yeah,
aunt,
yeah.
who lived 3 doors down on Chandler Street. He never really got to see her. But more times than not, halfway through the service, somehow we would be pinched, or something would cause a disturbance, which my dad would then grab us by the nape of the neck, because we were obviously out of control, and have to leave, not to disturb the service. And we would then go right down to see my aunt for the balance. I told my mother, she was so mad, because she knew what he was doing. It was an exit. It was just an exit.
That's funny.
I won't go down. Sorry, Nels, I will not talk about my dad and all the craziness that happened at the church services. Maybe tomorrow at the church. I'll demonstrate a few.
That video of the quote historian that is on the beach there telling about
Oh, yes.
his dad and how he actually saved America from the Nazis. That was
It was the
hilarious.
funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
Do you know Marty Edzik? He's an attorney with me.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, we went out to the Rose Bowl and watched the Buffalo Bills get annihilated. And so we went down to Long Point, near San Diego, where my dad was stationed during World War II. And my dad got in 1945, so it was right at the end. And he was stationed in San Diego area. So I want to see the base. I mean, my dad was in World War II, kind of. And so we went there. And so I had this camera. And we're on the base, and I'm just sort of, there's a bay, and on the bay are a bunch of broken up vessels. I mean, it's just a bunch of stuff. So I turned to Marty and go, Marty, we just went on the base, talk to me about what you found out about my dad. Now this is totally extemporaneous. Just totally no queuing up, nothing. Just boom. And he nailed it. He absolutely nailed how as soon as the Japan knew that Lyle Peterson was here,
that beach.
he was on the job.
And assassins were after him.
Yes.
What killed me is they'd put poison all over the ground, but it didn't affect her father because he wore 2 pairs of socks.
It was comedic genius.
It really was.
It was comedic genius. So I've used it all with the family members up there. And Marty's become a hero in our family because he trusted me. Now the postscript to that, my dad laughed at that because he saw it all also. But then he went to Notre Dame, where Marty had gone to law school. He's walking around and he finds a dump where all the mattresses are outside, beer bottles all over the place, and he's interviewing people about the Marty Idzik legacy at Notre Dame. So he posted that, He was good at it.
He was indeed. I love it.
What did your dad do for a living?
He worked at Jamestown Electroplating. So he was in business, plating business.
Okay.
Before that, he worked at Genealogy and Carlson's, which was a newsstand, and that's probably where he even knew your family.
Okay.
And so that's the basic. Those are basic 2 jobs he had his entire life.
Greg, do you want to circle back with, to update Mills on James' family?
Yeah, let's just do that before we run out of gas here.
Yeah.
Here we are. Jimmy, we forgot, you talked about yourself, but now talk a little bit about siblings and your children.
Is that for me? No,
Right.
that's mine.
Yeah,
Did he give that to you?
Yes.
I was born in 1946.
One copy?
And
Okay.
the first year of the baby boom.
Maybe Frank could do one here.
And then, and my father at the time had started Calvary Baptist Church in St. Paul there. And the church was going very well. In fact, it still is. It's a flagship church for that whole area. And I can remember as a little 3-year-old being in a Sunday school program and singing songs and so on. But anyway, he was on the radio, and he would have this radio program, and there was another older man who was kind of in charge of the radio and had really built that audience up. And he wanted my dad to take it over. He said, look, I'm going to have to retire here in a little while. I want you to become the radio person. And so my dad had every reason to stay there in the Twin Cities. Plus, he was pastor of his church. And, but he got the conference told him that there was a church out in California that had about 100 people, but it was right in the heart of the fastest growing region in Southern California, a place called Long Beach and Lakewood. Mm-hmm. And Lakewood at the time, after the war, everybody was moving there. They were building hundreds of homes. And my dad went out there, and in the meantime, my brother had been born 3.5 years after I was, Ronnie. And so he went out there, and here's this little chapel. It's got about 100 people, and he really feels the call of God because there's just all kinds of families moving in. So he goes back and he says, Janie, how'd you like to move to California? Well, that's like moving to a foreign country at that time. And and she says, but she was kind of like Ruth in the Bible. Wherever you go, I'll go. That type of thing. And so she says, okay, let's go. And they get out there, and for the next 17 years, this church became the largest church in the Baptist General Conference, 2,500 members. All we ever knew were people who were coming to know Christ regularly. Every month, we would welcome about 50 new members in the fellowship of the church. And all these World War II vets who were coming back, having families, moving into Lakewood, they were all looking for a church. And I mean, he used to do crazy things like, we had a Sunday school superintendent, and we put him up in a tree there at the church. And he was going to stay up there, living up in that tree in a tree house, until we got 1,000 kids in Sunday school. And I mean, it was a big deal. It was in the news and everything. And lo and behold, the next Sunday we get 1,000 kids in Sunday school, so he would come down from the tree. Stuff like that. And but the church really grew. Well, both my brother and I went into ministry. And Julie came along 10 years after I did, Julianne, and I went to Bethel. I did gospel team work there. Had a chance to go to Korea and preach with Youth for Christ and do a lot of things like that. Marilyn and I were married right after college, and she became a registered nurse. She put me through seminary, and then we started our ministry. And I went into the Navy chaplaincy, and then spent times in the reserves. We pastored churches in Hawaii, Colorado, and Ludington, Michigan, and that's where we retired. Ronnie, he followed me, and I was sort of the traditionalist in the family, and Ronnie was just the opposite. Mm-hmm. And he was a free spirit. He went to about 7 different colleges before he graduated. Among them were Berkeley. He also went to the Institute of Holy Land Studies in the Holy Land. He spent about a year over there. He got involved in the aftermath of the 6-Day War, found himself in the middle of the Sinai Desert, in the middle of a minefield, and had
That
to
story is crazy.
get his way out. I mean, it's just a miracle he's still alive at that time. And then he really developed, he went to Bethel Seminary and he developed an apologetics ministry where he wanted to defend the Christian faith. And so he started just volunteering in churches to held seminars. And so I think maybe Dan, you heard it one time. And this developed to the point where he was invited to churches all over America and then all over the world. And he did a great job. I had him probably 3 or 4 times in churches where I served. He was one of the best in that whole area of ministry. He was scheduled in 2011 to go to Cuba to speak to a group of pastors there, and they had books printed in Spanish, and he'd written a book, Fast Facts on non-Christian cults, and they'd sent several hundred copies to Cuba. He was going to go the next week. They had a lake house in Wisconsin, and he had been working out in the garden. He told his wife, I just need to take a nap. I'm really tired. And she went and did some other chores and came back, and he had passed away. And we never had an autopsy, but he had trouble with his heart. He'd had this arrhythmia, and had trouble various times, and so we just kind of feel something had happened there. But he's got 2 sons, and both of them have really carried on that ministry. His oldest son, Jason, is a spitting image of his dad, and Ron was about 6'3". He's a big guy. And oldest son, Jason's the same one. And so he's a pastor of a church. Marilyn, is that the conference church he's a pastor of?
I think it's Jared's at the
Yeah,
conference
okay.
church.
I think
Jason's
it's
with Edith
Free Church. But he's a good pastor, but they give him time off to do this apologetics ministry. He was just, we live in northern Kentucky, he was just out at the Ark at a big conference where 3,000 people came. Wow. And he spoke, and he did such a great job, they're going to have him come back next year. So he's really, really good at what he does, and just because Ron passed away, really what happened is that both him and his brother, who is a wonderful speaker, speaks at youth camps all over the country, and is also a pastor. Ron's ministry has been expanded in some ways that he never could have dreamed. And then Marilyn and I, we have 3 children. We have 2 sons. Our oldest son is a Navy chaplain based in Texas. Our second son has been for almost 30 years now a teacher at an international school in the Philippines. And then our daughter, she married a fellow who graduated from Biola.
No. Moody
Bible Institute, that's right. And he,
Thank you, Marilyn. Fact checking. Fact checking, that's good.
Marilyn, make sure I get everything right. He was the man who did all of the put in all of the audio and the video for the Creation Museum, and also much of the work for the Ark. And so he's just a wonderful son-in-law, and all of our children know the Lord. We just thank God for that. And grandchildren, we have 11 grandchildren. Wow. And it's just been a good thing. David has 2 sons. One is in high school. The other one has just graduated from Concordia College. He went through the YATSE program, what do you call it?
ROTC.
ROTC. And it was commissioned as an officer and just completed the program with the military and cybersecurity. So he's going to be stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. Is that right?
That's the one the dad made him become a Lutheran.
What's that again?
It goes around, comes around. Before he let him marry his daughter, he had to become a Lutheran.
Oh, that's, yeah.
But he's baptized as a Baptist.
The girl he married is a Lutheran,
Yeah,
and he's become
she's a
Lutheran, but he's,
they're a wonderful
he's,
family.
they love the Lord. It's
Yeah.
Missouri Synod
Missouri
Lutheran
Synod
Church.
Lutheran.
And we're just thankful for that. But anyway, Marilyn and I are retired. We retired after 24 years in Michigan, and we live in Kentucky. We've lived there for about 12 years now. And we have, our daughter lives in there in Kentucky. We connect with her on a regular basis, and she has 4 beautiful daughters. So that is kind of what we're about. We belong to a wonderful Baptist church there near where we live, and we're both involved in various ministries of one kind or another, and we just try to keep active. I do a lot of discipleship with certain people that really need to grow in their faith, and that's kind of one thing I've done all my ministry. So that's kind of where we're at.
You do have a sister.
Mention Julie.
Yes, Julie.
Oh, I forgot Julie.
Yeah, minor thing.
Julie, she came along 10 years after I did. She married a fellow that was a heating and air conditioning expert, and he used to teach that to other people and so on, and has recently been retired. They have 2 children. One is their son Patrick, who is a journeyman electrician, and the second is Kristen, who is a psychologist for a consortium or a group of homeschool families that all come together and use her services, and they all live in Northern California.
Did Julie happen to go to Bethel?
She went to Bethel for 1 year, and then she decided to finish out in California. And that's where our parents, Harold and Jane, they were in Lakewood Baptist for 17 years. They then went out to Napa, California, where he ministered for a couple of years, and then were called to Fair Oaks Baptist in Concord, California, and that's where he retired, and they retired to Napa, California, up in the wine country there. And had a nice place, and he passed away there in the year 2000, and my mother passed away at the age of 98. She's the oldest family member on that side of the family to survive that long, and we had her funeral a couple of years ago. And we just last year, was it last year your father passed away?
Yeah.
Marilyn's mother passed away when she was, how old, 59?
64.
64 years old. But her father was a pilot for American Airlines, and one of the earliest pilots. He was a trainer for pilots during World War II, and right after World War II, American Airlines was just getting started. And so he went and he says, I'd like to be a pilot for this new airline. And yeah, he was one of the first pilots for American Airlines, flew with them until he retired, and then lived to be 103 years old. Sharp as a tack, drove until he was 100, and there is a museum in California that has his jackets and his hat and all kind of memorabilia, because at one time he was the oldest retired American Airlines pilot in the world.
Wow.
And so he's got a big display, and so
But
anyway.
There's military things too from him.
From the military too.
From him, training pilots.
He's
during
quite a
the war.
guy. He's one of these who he grew up in abject poverty. His parents immigrated from Poland, and he had to leave home at the age of 14 because his parents just simply couldn't afford him. And so he went to live with his brother, and they just made it. And he, when he could earn enough money, took flying lessons, learned how to fly, and in the early days of flying, and he just learned how to fly, and then he trained World War II pilots, and that's what he did. He flew the DC-10 at the end. He was qualified to fly 747s and DC-10s and just about every airplane you can imagine. He's just an amazing guy. So that's kind of where our family is at the present, and looking forward to someday reminiscing in heaven with all of the relatives that have gone before us, and hearing a lot more stories. Because I got a feeling that when we get there, Jesus is going to allow us to do a lot of that reminiscing.
We have fought enough. Lynette, let's go back to you because I got you sidetracked, but a little bit just about your family and your sibling, Tanya. I mean, again, this is for Nils.
Okay. Start with Tanya. Tanya married Dick Starviarski, as I said when we were talking about Grandma. And they had 2 kids, Jeffrey Todd and Cheryl Lynn. Cheryl and Jeffrey are both married. Jeffrey has married Shelley Lynn, and they have 1 daughter, Sarah. And Sarah has 2 children, a girl and a boy, and Elijah and Harper. Harper's the girl and Elijah. And they are very Christian and belong to one of the big non-denominational churches in Bowling Green. But now they each go to a different small community church in their places. Wonderful family. Jeff has a lot of medical problems. He just got out of the hospital, about 4 weeks ago maybe? Yeah. And it's just been one thing after another. But Dennis and I stop every time we go back and forth, and we take them out to dinner and get to know what's going on with them. And Cheryl.
By the way, Tanya, Dick passed away.
Yeah, Dick passed away, and Tanya married Ted Balicki, and it has been absolutely wonderful. I worried about her being alone, and Ted adored her, and she adored him, and she just died in December.
Christmas Day?
Christmas Day, yeah. And Cheryl did the most remarkable thing that it makes me cry every time I think about it, which is Cheryl really accepted how much love Ted and Tanya had, but it's not her dad, But still, when she died, she decided all by herself to break the ashes in half, and half is buried with Dick, and Ted is going to put half in his urn, and she'll be buried with him. I just think that's remarkable. I'm so proud of Cheryl for doing that, and she thought about it all by herself. I find it remarkable, and I love her for it. And she's got piles of kids, which I can't even remember. No, Tegan. Well, she's got 3 boys. Yeah, Shane, Danny, and Patrick. Patrick's not married. Shane is married. He's the oldest, and he has 3, and they're all boys.
No,
there's a girl.
Cheryl finally got a girl, yeah.
Yeah, you get the names because I'd have to look them up.
Well, I think one's Declan.
Oh,
gosh, yeah. And then Deanne, her middle boy, has 2 girls.
Yes, Tegan and Taryn.
Yeah.
Those I can remember. Where is, this is our family, so
they all live in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they all live in Pittsburgh near Becky, and they're good friends. Declan, Elliot, and McLean. And McLean is the girl. McLean
all
Elizabeth.
Irish names.
Yeah, all Irish names.
Yeah.
They're Irish. And she did have to turn Roman Catholic to marry Bill. I don't think they do a lot of church, do they? Off and on? Yeah. I do remember she told us once that the priest gave them a hard time about not being in church, and did so by returning their donation.
Yeah.
Yeah, not cool. Not cool. So, yeah.
Wow.
And
I don't think we did that, would we?
no, we would never do that. Not ever.
Wow.
Like dirty money.
Yeah, like dirty money, exactly. And I grew up here in Jamestown, and I went out to see your dad in Southern California before you guys were born, I think, because I won a debate championship here, and we got to go to California So I spent a day
Well,
with
we
him.
would have, we were already born when he moved out there. I
Oh,
was
were you?
already 5 years old and Ron was like one.
No, but this was when I was in, high school, 1960. And he was somewhere in Southern California at that point. Because I went to visit him.
Well,
Near Disneyland.
we moved out there in '51, so
Okay,
he
yeah.
may have just gone out there to Canada or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but I remember visiting him, it was really cool.
Okay.
Anyhow, and I married Dennis O'Prey, whose father was the Episcopal priest at St. Luke's for many, many years. We did get married in his church. I did not convert until a year later. Well, actually more than that. We did start going to an Episcopal church in St. Paul when we lived there. But it wasn't until we had a couple of kids that I decided I probably better join the crew. So I did do that. And about the same time, Dennis had been teaching at the University of Minnesota, American Studies, and decided that he really had the call, and so he got ordained. And one of the stories he loves to tell is that he went in to tell the bishop of Minnesota, who has a lot of control over such things, that he wanted to get ordained, and he wondered which seminary he should go to. Could he go to New York, where his dad was, where his dad had graduated from, what's the seminary? Oh, Lord, the names escape me because Dennis was president of the board for 3 years. We had an apartment in New York. I can't remember. Well, that's terrible. I will. It'll come to me. But anyhow, the bishop said to Dennis, "I'm sorry, you won't go to seminary. You'll have to study locally." Because Lynette is the controller for Episcopal Community Services, and we can't lose her. So you can go to seminary. So he did. He went to a couple Lutheran seminaries, learned a lot of stuff, and then read a lot of stuff, and he had to pass an exam from the coordinating committee in the diocese, and so there were a half a dozen oral exams, and he passed them all. But the dean of the cathedral in Minneapolis, when he got done, said, "Dennis, you don't know a thing, but you got really good instincts."
Oh dear.
Yes, you don't know a thing. He couldn't even remember the birth dates of his own kids. I mean, that was part of it. So we were in Minnesota from 1964 to 1983. And then he got a call to Pasadena, California, for the largest Episcopal church west of the Mississippi. And I'm All Saints Episcopal Church. Very liberal, very whatever. And he did social ministry for them. And then we got called to Church of Our Savior in San Gabriel, California. And at that time I was doing accounting for nonprofits and the mafia when we first got there. And we have 3 kids, Michael, Mark, and Matthew. Can you tell? And Michael is married to Emily Jo Scribner, and they have hyphenated their last name, so it's Scribner O'Prey. And Michael is a nurse at Children's Hospital in the ER, loves it, and has expanded to doing diversity training for nurses. Yeah, so he does that as an extra, as a volunteer. It's quite a program they have. It's really exciting. They have actors come in, and they take a group of 6 nurses, and Michael facilitates. The actors will act out a scene, and one nurse is responding to them. They're usually immigrants or Native Americans or black people, and with all the terrible things that do help in healthcare for those groups, they're trying to sensitize the nurses, and so the nurses will respond some way, and then they come back in and the group talks about it, and then they send another nurse in, and they keep doing it, and at the end the actors come in and tell them what they thought about each of the scenarios. It's really amazingly fascinated. He also, as a nurse, got a grant to do a study on pain management in the ER, and it has been published worldwide. He loves seeing every new spot that lights up on the internet that they've seen it, and he does several times a year go to conferences and teach other ERs how to do painless medication or painless stitching normally. He's a suture nurse as well as charge nurse from time to time. They have 2 kids, Grace Aaron, Scribner O'Prey. She has a partner, not a spouse. His name is Miller something Huntington Judge. And great guy. He works for a pharmacy company, helping pharmacy companies determine, unfortunately, what disease or what drug to work on that will make the most money. Hate that, but that's the way it is in the world. And she's an RN in Children's Hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida. Took after her dad. And Ezra is Ezra Owen, and he is in the Netherlands. He started college in Augsburg in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, but had met a girl on his gap year in Norway that he thought he was going to be in love with for the rest of his life, and she was going to school in the Netherlands, so he got himself a placement in a school in the Netherlands, and he has graduated from there, and he's working in the Netherlands for a catering company at The Hague. So he gets into all these international conferences and just loves what he's learning. And he's staying because he wants to get EU citizenship, and because he was there for 4 years for college, well, actually more than 4 years. He's only got a year and a half left to go. So he's going to stick. However, the girl didn't stick, so unfortunately, because we liked her a lot. She's been over here a couple of times, but it didn't work. And then I have Mark Andrew Edston O'Prey. He's adopted, came from Louisville, Kentucky. And actually, there's a wonderful story about Mark and just people in general. First of all, we went in for the adoption, and you do all this training, and then they ask you what you want. And Michael was premature and very ill for his first year, and he was still like 1 or 2. And so I said, well, I want a healthy kid. I'd really prefer an infant, and I don't think my family will do well with black. So that's sort of where we're at. And Lutheran Social Services is very tricky. They get you in there after you've done all this training, and they sit you down, and then she disappears. And they've got these books of hard-to-adopt kids, labeled exactly that. And she disappears, and you're flipping the pages. And suddenly there's a face that shines out there, and she came back, and I said, tell me about this one. And she said, well, he's almost a year old, and he is black, as you can tell from the photo, and he's got lots of health issues, mostly with earaches. And I looked at Dennis, and Dennis looked at me, and he said, who's better able to take care of a kid like that? And so we did adopt him, and when I went to pick him up in Louisville, I went alone, and Dennis stayed home with Michael. And he had an earache, and you get on the plane to go home, and he's just screaming his head off. I mean, it was just awful. And we were at the far back of the plane. Whole plane could hear him. We ran into trouble on the thing, so the flight was late. When we landed, the stewardess said, we have a new adopted family on board. Would you let them get off first? And there wasn't a single person who got off that plane before I walked from the whole back of the plane all the way out so that Dennis and Michael could greet us without the crowd. People are wonderful when given the chance. It just warms my heart. Just warms my heart. And he's been a joy. Unfortunately, he has not found a partner, but he's wonderful. He works for Ferguson Plumbing. He is a customer service person. makes good money, nice guy. Lives right next door to Michael in the Twin Cities. And Michael lives right across the alley from us. So we have a compound there. Yes. And then we leave out our littlest one, Matthew. He's still in California. And he finished a job about 2 years ago at USC as Director of Admission for the School of Engineering, which had him traveling all the time. And he is now the person in charge of the endowment funds for the School of Engineering. And they have about 2,000 different scholarship funds that he has to monitor and look at, and loves the work of it. Everybody's thinking about retirement, but not really. They're early 50s, late 50s. So.
We'll talk about your grandkids.
Oh, yes, my grandkids. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to forget my grandkids. How could I get?
You talked about Michael's, but not Matthew's.
I forgot Matthew's. Matthew has one daughter. Thank you. Named originally Emily Claire. And she went to Marlborough College in Vermont, which is the school, same school her father went to and her mother went to. They met at Marlborough. And she met the person she married last August. Yeah, last August. At that point, when they met, it was Marie Winfield Luther. They have both changed their names before the wedding. Claire is now Alexander Claire O'Prey, and she's keeping her name, as is Marie, except Marie is now Thomas Marie Winfield Luther, and they have kept those. Dennis did the wedding in a wonderful glen in the woods in Marlborough, right next to the school. They were staying with the former professor, and they just got a new apartment in Northampton, Massachusetts, because Claire, I still call her Claire, but it's Alexander Claire, is doing her master's degree in psychology at Smith College in Massachusetts, in Boston. No, where is it? I don't know. Anyhow, the girls' school. And Thomas just started at the U of Massachusetts at Amherst in botany for her PhD. So everybody's doing great. It's wonderful.
Well, this has been great. Good ending.
Greg, well, how about you and Randy? Nils knows about our family, so do you want to?
Yeah, okay, briefly. You're going to hear this while looking at my sister. Yeah, I'm the oldest and born in 1951 and married Cindy in 1977. This can be a test. And we have 3 children. Amy, Megan, and Brent. Amy has 1 child, Odin, Swedes, and Megan has 2 girls, Piper and Wren, and Brent, the 3rd, has 2 children, Nora and Milo. Amy and Megan are currently in Detroit. They're both attorneys by profession, but they've not practiced recently, and they're very successful operations otherwise. Brent is working for the Department of Economic Development in the District of Columbia, and is a singer-songwriter, and his wife Leah works for the Pew Institute down in Washington. Back up to Amy, I forgot, her husband Antonio is likewise an investment banker, international, and is most recently a professor at the University of Michigan. So that's my family.
Well, how about if Randy, I can do something about Randy.
Oh, the film's on you. Let's give you a flash. Do you want to
we can't
lay?
No, you can't forget.
No, Randy is our middle child, and he is married to Sue. She was just here, and they both live in Jamestown. Randy sadly passed away in 2014 from complications of cancer, colon cancer and anal cancer, so very much missed. They have 3 children, Jeremy and Lychon. They live now in Rochester, outside Buffalo, actually.
Yeah, Buffalo.
Married.
Sue, I said that.
That's what she said.
And they're both from Jamestown, and they both, Sue is a Jamestown native too, and they met through actually Dave Erickson, fixed them up, who is a second cousin, so there's always that connection. So their oldest son is Jeremy, he's an accountant, and so is Lai Chung, and they live outside of Buffalo. They have 2 children, Jake and Chase, who are very active in sports. I think that keeps them busy. Adam is down in Naples, Florida, and he is married to Amanda, and they have 3 children, Abigail, Benjamin, and Josh, and they're into swimming a lot. Adam was a swimmer in high school, and so their kids, and in addition to baseball and all the other sports, so both of their kids, Adam and Amanda, are teachers down in the Naples area, and her youngest child is Betsy, and she lives in Nyack, New York, which is just outside of New York. Betsy's a teacher and middle school math, just like my son, and her husband Craig is an accountant, and they have 2 children, Lucas and Sophia, good Swedish names, and they come up. Betsy, the joy, one of the advantages of being a teacher is you get the summers off, so Betsy is seen up here a lot. Shirley, I have a favor to ask, and while we end this, you and I talked about Day by Day. Do you remember it? I have the lyrics.
Okay.
Okay, we just do one? Okay.
Day by day, and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here. Trusting in my Father's wise bestowment, I've no cause for worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond all measure gives unto each day what he deems best. Lovingly, its heart of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest.
Nice job.
Mike, that's one of my son's favorite hymns, and it's interesting, this is not sung in the Presbyterian church, so I just love that he loves this song.
Nice job, Shirley. So you had the first word, let's have the last word.
Well, this has been such a joy, and I know that we are now throwing a rope up into heaven, and I know that all of are grabbing onto it, and they're just so happy that we're connecting in this just incredible way. Thank you, Nils, for getting us started, and Monica, and giving us just incredible information, and we hope someday that we can all meet together and share this joy. So thank you, and thank you for everybody for carving out this time.
Fabulous.
In a very busy time of everybody's lives. We just thank you. And we can see that faith, that beautiful faith, has seen itself through all the years and all the generations. And I am blessed by that. I think one of the things that I really wanted for my family was what I was brought up with. And that was really my one desire. It wasn't other stuff. It was that I wanted that faith to be translated down to my kids, and I'm blessed because that has happened. So I'm so blessed to have had family that loves the Lord. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, that's a wrap.